How are you?
Oh, I'm still alive.
That's that counts for something.
Well, it,
Okay, well, this interview we will distribute quite widely.
thank you.
And
Okay.
we'll have two others. We'll do three. So
Yeah.
you're the first cab off the rank.
Yeah. Okay. That's
So
fine.
because we wanted someone with your background to fill
Sure.
us in.
Sure.
And we will have an introduction for you, a nice slide which will introduce you, background, etc.
Okay.
Some of the
Okay.
books you've written. So I don't have to say it now, but it'll
Okay.
be on the screen.
No, that's fine. Problem.
I mean, you are a recognized international expert on have been for many years on the Middle East and Central Asia. And you've seen so many conflicts emerge during this period. What do you think is happening right now? How have we got to this very difficult, seemingly intractable situation of the last couple of years?
Well, thank you very much for asking that question. I mean, it is a very tragic situation. Iran has had a nuclear program which was established during the Shah's time. And when the Islamic Republic came to power, or the Khomeini's regime, it decided to expand the nuclear program and also establish a military element in it. Uh, that was mainly to establish deterrence against any possible American and Israeli attacks on Iran. But by 2003, when President Mohammad Khatami was in power, and of course he was a reformist, they decided to abolish the military element. And they informed the International Atomic Energy. And of course, Iran has been a signatory to the NPT, the Non-Proliferation Treaty, and has tried to observe the rules of that treaty. Uh, and it was precisely on that basis that President Obama was willing to interact with his Iranian counterpart, that's President Hassan Rouhani, who also had come from a reformist background, to conclude the July 2015 Iran nuclear agreement. And that agreement basically provided for Iran to downgrade its uranium enrichment to 3.7% for civilian use or for peaceful purposes, and in return for lifting of the sanctions against Iran. The United States left a number of sanctions, but the ones related to Iran's missile industry and also the accusation that Iran was sponsoring terrorism and this and that, those sanctions still remained in place. And Iran was still kept out of the SWIFT, which made the economic situation and financial situation of Iran a very difficult one. And so what has really happened that Prime Minister Netanyahu has been doggedly pursuing a policy of regime change in Iran over a long period of time. He's focused on Iran's nuclear program, and he called the 2015 Iran nuclear agreement the worst deal of the century, and he rejected it. And he heavily lobbied the United States, and particularly President Trump during his first presidency, that he should cancel America's participation in that agreement. And of course, as we know, President Trump has been more committed to the state of Israel than any other previous American president. And in May 2018, he withdrew the United States from the nuclear agreement, and that, of course, rendered the agreement virtually defunct. But there was a snapback clause in the agreement which could allow Iranians to really go back to their original position and therefore accelerate their uranium enrichment and also install more advanced centrifuges. And as a result, the Iranians have been able to enrich uranium up to 60% purity, and they have also accumulated something like about 400 kilograms of enriched uranium. And that has proved to be quite alarming to Netanyahu and as well as to the Trump administration. So they have really decided that the time has really come that they really need to do something about it. First, President Trump proposed to the Iranians the diplomatic dialogue in order to reach a new agreement. 5 rounds of talks took place between Iran and the United States, and they were indirect talks, but they were inconclusive. Of course, it is a very complex issue. It's not something that you can overcome, within the 2 months mandate that Trump had established. But Prime Minister Netanyahu was very unhappy with that. He had always stood for military action as the best means to solve the issue or to solve the problem. He wanted what he called the Libyan as a solution. That is, that Iran should give up its entire nuclear program. It should not even have it for peaceful purposes. And while they were in the middle of negotiations, and they were supposed to hold hold the 6th round of negotiations in Muscat, the Sultanate of Oman, that Israel decided to attack Iran and started the current war with Iran. Iranians were not responsible for the advent of this war. It was basically at Netanyahu and Israelis' initiatives, but of course, Iran had to respond. And initially, I think the Trump administration were cautious about the possibility of military intervention, but Trump was persuaded again, I think, by Prime Minister Netanyahu, that now the only option left is, of course, military solution. But in the meantime, there had been very intensive exchanges of fire between Iran and Israel, and this is the first time that Israelis have really sustained heavy damages from the Iranian missiles and drones. In fact, Iranians have been targeting Tel Aviv, which is a very densely populated city, and the port of Haifa, but also some other areas. But at the same time, the Israelis have really maintained or gained considerable amount of control over the air of or over the skies of Iran, and particularly of Tehran, and they have also inflicted very heavy damages to Iran. Something like more than 500 Iranians have been killed, and most of them civilians, and also hundreds of more have been injured. But in return, of course, also a number of Israelis have been killed and injured. So that's where we really are. And then finally, President Trump has decided that he will go and bomb those 3 nuclear sites, and particularly Fardo, where the largest uranium enrichment plant had been located. President Trump has announced that they have totally obliterated the Iranian enrichment program and also the nuclear program as a whole. But there are reports coming in that actually they have not been able to cause the degree of damage that they have claimed so far. And also Iranians had evacuated some of those sites, and they had taken away the amount of uranium that they had already enriched.
Okay. Now, thank you for that very comprehensive account of the history. Now, let me put this question to you. This is a bit hypothetical, but I'd be interested in your response. Could Trump have done what he's done and made the claims that he's made, complete destruction of nuclear facilities, thinking that then that would tie Israel to ending its own military strikes against Iran because job completed? The issue being the destruction of the nuclear capability of Iran. Well, that supposedly has been done. There's no further reason for continuing. Could this have been a clever way on his part, or he thought so, of bringing the military conflict between the two countries to an end? Or do you think that's too favorable an assessment of his intentions?
No, he could certainly he could have done it. I mean, if he wanted to really tie the bombing of the Iranian nuclear facilities with an end to Israeli aggression against Iran and an end to the war between the two sides, he certainly could have done it. But that's not what he decided to do. He has decided that he's going to protect the state of Israel, and he's going to basically punish Iran, although Iran had engaged in no provocative action against the United States. And I think what the US has done, and many international lawyers have already come out and said that was totally illegal, and it was a breach of Iranian sovereignty. And now, of course, the ball is in the Iranian court, how they are going to retaliate. And of course, they've got many options that we can discuss those options if you wish. But at the same time, what the United States has done is basically to enable Prime Minister Netanyahu to stay in power much longer and possibly achieve his ultimate goal of greater Israel, or what is been named as the master plan that he has in mind. And he's already said in some of his interviews that he wants to bring down what he's called the Islamic Empire in Iran, and expand the Abraham Accords in order to include more Arab countries in that, and basically put an end to Palestinians' aspiration for an independent state of their own for once and all.
Okay, well, so on the conflict now, which is developing all the time, and so far it's been escalating. Who is driving it, in your judgment, now? Is it Trump's America or Netanyahu's Israel? Who's driving it?
I think from all the reports that are coming in, it seems that Prime Minister Netanyahu is in the driving seat. And of course, there have been also a number of supporters of President Trump who have made a similar sort of claim. And they've said that is United States foreign policy, and particularly more specifically Middle East policy, has very much hijacked and driven by Netanyahu. And I think that's where some of the Mr. Trump's even mega supporters very much fear that the United States is not really acting in the national interest of the US, but more in the interest of Israel, and more specifically Prime Minister Netanyahu.
Okay. Now, a question that's been at the back of my mind: how do you see the connection, or is there a connection between the Israel-Iran conflict and what's been the war in Gaza?
Well, the Iranians have been strong supporters, or more specifically, the Iranian government has been a strong supporter of the Palestinian cause over a long period of time. And they have been involved in providing whatever assistance they could, for example, to Hamas, and as well as to a number of other anti-Israeli forces in the region. and there is, I mean, the Iranians have already claimed that there is a close relationship between what has been happening between Iran and Israel and what Israel has been doing in Gaza. Uh, and the Iranians have, for example, come out and said that the other countries in the region have done nothing in support of the Palestinian cause, and Iran is the only country which has done so. Nobody rules out the possibility of Iran's political interest in the whole thing, or the Iranian regime's political interest in the whole thing. But there is no question that Iran has been the strongest supporter of the Palestinian cause in the region.
Well, that leads to the next question. While all this has been happening, Gaza, and then, of course, Lebanon strikes in Lebanon, even strikes in Syria, and now the direct attacks on Iran, where do the neighboring Arab countries stand? Where are they? What are they thinking or saying?
Well, I think when we talk about the Arab countries, we have to recognize the dichotomy between the state and society in these countries. Many of the leaderships in the Arab world have been very cautious in relation to their either dependence on the United States or the security that the United States has been really providing them. And therefore, while they have condemned, for example, the Israeli aggression against Iran, and they have rhetorically declared support for the Palestinian cause, but they have not taken the kind of concrete steps which are absolutely necessary in order to prevent Israel to do what Israel has been doing, particularly in Gaza, and of course also to a considerable extent in the West Bank. But then there is the societies in the Arab world, the streets in the Arab world. I think they are outraged by what Israel has been doing against the Palestinians, and also I think quietly many of them are pleased to see that for the first time in its history, Israel has got a real bashing by the Iranians.
Where does all this leave Iran at the moment? Excuse me, the current government of Iran at the moment?
Well, I mean, as we know that the Iranian government is not universally popular inside the country, there is a considerable amount of opposition to the regime, and particularly to the theocratic aspects of the regime. And that was, of course, in many ways reflected in the women's movements, which started 3 years ago. And although the authorities have been able to bring it under control to some extent, but it's still bubbling underneath, and it's everywhere. And of course, there's also many Iranians who have been very displeased with the regime because of the dire economic situation and the sanctions that Iran had been laboring under over a long period of time. They would like to really see a more prosperous Iran than what is transpired as a result of Iranian regimes or the hostility which exists between the Iranian regime and Israel and the United States and some of the other allies of the United States. But at the same time, to me, it appears that the regime is still in control of the situation because it still has possesses or the instrumentalities of state power to be able to deal with any internal disorder and also to some extent any external challenge. But now it is situated in a very precarious position. It does face a major outside aggression. and that is on the part of Israel. And of course, now the United States, in a way, has entered the war by supporting Israel, and how that regime is going to respond and what consequences that's going to have for it, I mean, remains to be seen. But the regime has a number of options that now can activate in response to American bombing of these three nuclear sites. I mean, one is to basically play down the importance or the significance of the damage that the United States may have caused to these sites, and therefore not to retaliate. But of course, that will undermine its own domestic position to a considerable extent, because the regime had said over and over that should the United States attack Iran, they will target American interests right across the region. I mean, that's one option. The second option is that you could possibly close the Strait of Hormuz, through which something like 25% of the world oil go through. But that's going to be difficult one, in a sense that it will also damage Iran itself, because it won't be able to export its oil, and one of the major buyers of Iranian oil is of course China. And Iran has a treaty of cooperation with China, but Iran also have a treaty of strategic cooperation with Russia. Uh, while the Iranian National Assembly has just passed a resolution authorizing the government to close the Strait of Hormuz, but I think that is under consideration at the moment. And the Americans have said that if the Strait of Hormuz is closed, then they will take action. So that could also result in expansion of the war. The third option that the Iranians have is to basically withdraw from the NPT, and then go ahead with developing their nuclear program without any international inspection or involvement of the international atomic energy. I mean, the fourth option that they have is to hit Israel harder. And they've already started that. Yesterday, they lobbed quite a number of drones and missiles into Tel Aviv, Haifa, and some of the other places, in particular also southern Israel. And they have caused considerable amount of damage. But how long they can really continue that, that will depend whether they're going to receive any assistance, for example, from their close friends like Russia and China. I mean, that really remains to be seen. So they have got a number of options, but at the same time, none of them really looks all that terrific in terms of benefiting Iran. But then again, the Iranian people are very proud people. They are very proud of their history. They're proud of their civilization and proud of their culture. And whenever Iran historically has come or threatened by an outside force, the Iranian public has united behind whatever regime has been in power.
Mhm.
And
Sorry, please go on.
yeah, and I think now is really the real test, that how the regime is going to deal with the situation and how the Iranian public is going to react. But of course, the Iranian public is very much encouraged by Prime Minister Netanyahu, and now also by President Trump, to rise against their government. But my own personal reading of the situation is that probably this is not the time that the Iranians will try to overthrow their government. And then the question is, what is going to come next? I mean, that's another important question.
Brings me to the final question I'd like to put to you. Do you see any role for third parties, be it the Europeans, Turkey, Russia, China, anyone? Is there any possibility of trying to bring wiser heads to prevail?
Well, the European Union could have played a more effective role and a more positive role, but I don't think they've done so. They have basically supported the American bombing of the Iranian sites, and also they have turned a blind eye to what Israel has been really doing in the region. And so therefore, they have not been able to play as an effective role as they should have. Although they have called for restraint between Iran and Israel, and they have called on Iran to come back to the negotiating table. But of course, from the Iranian perspective, what is there to negotiate now? I mean, if the problem was Iran's nuclear program, and President Trump claims that he's totally obliterated that program, then what is really there to negotiate? But of course, they say that, look, there can be security negotiations, that the Americans may try to be interested in establishing or improving relations with Iran, and this and that and so on. But I think this is something really for the future, because the Iranian foreign minister has said that the door of the diplomacy is closed now. This is the time that Iran will have to really stand up to what the Iranian president Pezeshkian has said, the bullies of this world. President Vladimir Putin of Russia has offered to mediate, but then again, he does not have a lot of credibility given his own actions in Ukraine and what he's really doing there. I mean, but at the same time, President Trump claims that Putin is a very good friend. Putin could possibly pick up the phone and talk to President Trump and say, look, restrain Israel. And I think it's important that we should really bring about or restore peace between Iran and Israel. But that's a sort of a long shot. I think the Chinese could possibly mediate, because Chinese have got a lot of investment in Iran, and they are also importing a lot of Iranian oil and so on. And it's one of Iran's largest trading partner. For that matter, I think the largest one. They could play a role, but then again, given the state of hostility between Washington and Beijing, to me, it really doesn't appear that Beijing will be able to cut too many ribbons if it really decides to play a bigger role in terms of bringing about or putting an end to the hostility between Iran and Israel, and between Iran and the United States. There is a United Nations Security Council meeting at the moment, which has been, and a resolution has been sponsored by China, Russia, and I think it's Pakistan, for a ceasefire. But there's every chance that the United States may veto that.
Well, it doesn't look very promising, but let's hope there is some light at the end of the tunnel in the next little while. But from what you're saying, not very likely.
Not very likely in the near future, but I hope very much that level heads will prevail, and the Middle East will not see another big war, because the region has experienced too many wars since World War II, and the United States has intervened in the Middle East on average every 7 or 8 years. And I think it's about time that the people of Middle East could determine their own future free of outside interferences.
Well, I hope some of those governments you're referring to are listening to what you're having to say. Thank you so much, Amin. It's been a pleasure having this conversation. And I know that a great many people will draw a lot of information and get a better understanding of what's unfolding, a situation that is obviously of global significance. So thanks again for your time, and we'll remain in touch.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for having me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Thanks very much, Amin. I'll let you go to your next one now.
Oh, yes. Who's your next target?
Yes. Who's the next target? Where we'll get, well, Richard is going to be one.
Oh, great. Well,
and then I have Tillman Ruff. You probably know.
Great.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
So we'll see what, we'll see whether they have any reasonable hope in what may unfold. But I suspect they'll be close to your analysis. We'll see.